Hi, and welcome to part 12 of Let's Build a Chatbot in C# using Microsoft 18 Framework. Today we're going to add something that the real-life chatbots really don't have yet, which is adding that the user can add their own MCP servers and thereby giving more tools to the AI. So we're going to do it anyway, and in the process, we might see why people are not adding it. So let's first look at the finalized version of this. And you can see over here there's an MCP server. But before we go into that, I made a chat with the system here and this happened before I added any MCP servers or before the code was ready. So I asked, what is Trello.net? You might not know what that is, but it comes back here without any MCP servers and stuff and tells a little about it's a .NET client. And I kind of know this .NET client quite a lot because I'm the maintainer of this Trello.net, which is the REST-based API for Trello. And Trello, if you don't know, is a Kanban board tool where you can collaborate work and stuff like that. So it's essentially just an API that I've made. It's open source, public repo, and everything. But since it knows it, why do we need an MCP server? Or why do we feel there's a problem here? Well, I know this kind of well, and when it comes down and show an example of how to do this, this is absolutely made up stuff. It is not the way it's done at all in the tool. This call would not even compile, and most of it, the rest of it wouldn't either. So it makes sense that we should be able to add tools, because not even a thing like Google Gemini, if I ask it, it knows a little more and it can link to it and stuff. But if I again ask it to show an example of doing something, it also makes it up. This cannot be done at all in the code. It would break if you put this in. So not even this can do it. I tried it with ChatGPT. It knows a little more, it seems, so it could actually do some of it. But again, imagine then if your implementation here was something that was a private repo and you had made an MCP server to tell about it. Because what I have done is I've made an MCP server for this, so it knows all the code. I have a separate video about that. If that is interesting, let me know and I will link to it. But essentially, I just have made an MCP server that runs up on an Azure function, and it has this URL. And what I did in order to fix this problem that it just came up with random nonsense is that I gave the MCP or the chatbot the MCP server of Trello.net Assistant, which is that URL up here. This one doesn't need any headers, keys and stuff, but it is built to be able to add stuff as well. But I'm not using it in this case. It's made to could have multiple servers if need be. And when I put that tool in, I can again ask exactly the same question, and it picks up that tool have a getting started about what this is and how to start using it. So this is a very little thing about how to do things, and it can use that in order to make the right thing. And in this case, it didn't make a big example. So I asked the same question as I did to Google Gemini. Show me an example on how to add a card. And it called another tool, and that tool gives back a lot of information. So this is more or less public members, public properties, and all kinds of things in the tool, we can try and check it out here. It's a big search result. And I give it back in an XML format style. If we grab a quick one here, it will, okay, it's with a lot of spaces and stuff, but it will tell a lot about what each of the things are and how to use them in the system. And what it gives back is a perfect example on how to do it, how to make the Trello client, how to get the current board, how to get the list, and such things. So believe me, this is 100% correct code, while before it was just made up code. So I gave it another example and asked it. This also shows that my tool is pretty expensive because it has some very big results back here. And that we can see in that we're actually using quite a lot of tokens, 13,000 tokens input here. And that might be one of the reasons why the big LLMs don't add tools like this, because they can't really control how much extra tokens you will end up using by putting them in. Some MCP tools cost almost nothing, but some tools cost more if they need to give back much information. So that might be one of the reasons. But in our case, again, we want it. So let's have a look into how this code is made. So let's jump over into Visual Studio. So first up, we needed to have a place to put our MCP servers. So we put that into the user personalization that we did a few sessions ago. And we just make a list of MCP servers, and those MCP servers can use name, URL, and headers. We're not going to tackle OAuth in this scenario, and we're not going to tackle local tools, which you probably wouldn't put into a chatbot anyway. So we're keeping it fairly simple with no authentication or simple API key authentication. I have separate videos on this channel about MCP auth. Needless to say, it's quite advanced how you actually do it. So we have the GUI, and the GUI for keeping it is up here. And honestly, I haven't really looked at it too much. I made Codex make this, but essentially it's just a button and then a small div that you are being shown as a dialog when we go in and click do this. So it's a bunch of normal Blazor, nothing to do with AI, so we won't go through it too much here. And the code behind it in order to save it, so we load the personalizations and put the data in, of course. So this is all done by AI, and I haven't made any of it. It's just simple things to do. The interesting part, of course, is that we want to have that being used. And the way we do that is we use one more feature of Agent Framework Toolkit, which is the tools area, and specifically the model context protocol tools area. This is something that can give a new factory. So just like we had the agent factory, we now also have an AI tool factory that can give back, that can turn an MCP server into tools. Because when we use Agent Framework, MCP servers are just tools like any other things. This one up here is just so we can put in the MCP servers to none when we run the first time, but nothing more than that. And then we have the interesting code here. So we add one of these AI tools factories that we just dependency injected down in the service defaults. Then I have extracted the tools that were down here, the two tools we had up front, the image generation tool and the weather tool, and just made them into a list here because we wanted to add on the fly more tools. And those more tools would come from each of the MCP servers we make. And that is done with this method that we will look at in 1 second, but it just gives us back a list of MCP clients. Because when we do this, and if we have multiple clients, we need to new up those clients. And we can't just take the tools by themselves. We need to keep these in memory while the calls are being made. We can't just discard them, because if we do, the client will close the connection. And that's probably one of the other reasons why MCP, the real-life chatbots, don't do this, that it would need to keep a lot of clients in memory from all the different users across the globe that are using them. And because it needs this persistent connection, it could be annoying for them. I'm just guessing here, but I could guess that would be one of the problems. But for us, we are only one user here. It might be internal usage, but you need to be aware if there's multiple here. But if we do this, we can get the tools, and let's have a look at how we get the tools, which is very simple. We just want a list of these MCP client tools. We get our personalization because that's where our MCP servers are. And for each of them, we just call this factory and say get tools from remote MCP. So behind the scenes, it's using the Model Context Protocol NuGet packets that exist and turn them into tools. Because the tools that you get out of an MCP server is actually just a variant of the AI tools that we normally get. So we just send the URL and the headers in and return these connections to MCP clients. And when we do that, we can get the tools, and we just now have some more tools. So in my case, if we set a breakpoint here and run, so let's quickly start a new one here and say, what is Trello.net? And of course, you can do this for any other thing. It's just, this is a convenient MCP server for me to test. So in 1 second, we should hopefully get this breakpoint. There we go. So it made the connection to the MCP, and it gave back one of these clients that have the MCP client that we need to keep in memory. And in my case, it has two tools. It had a tool that's called Getting Started, and it has a tool that's called Trello.net Code Assistant. And if we look at those tools, we can go in and check what they can do and stuff like that. So this takes an input as a question, and we get that back. So we add these tools. So now instead of the normal 2 tools, we get 4 tools. And if you had a MCP server that had 30 tools, you would get 30 tools out of here. And in my case, I only have one of these, but we could add multiple. And in the end, after it have went through and used the Getting Started tool in this case, we need to clean up after our MCP clients. We could do something more fancy that not spin them up every single time and tear them down every single time. We would keep them in a cache, using them again and again. But the initial connection and the teardown is not too difficult. So I'm just doing it very simple here. But you could begin to cache these MCP client tools. But in this case, we're just disposing them, so we get rid of the client, and we sever the connection between the server and the client MCP-wise, because we are done with our answer. And that is actually everything there is to it. So as you can see, it's just a different way of making tools, and we need a little GUI in order to do it. But it's quite simple once we have it, because we have this method. Behind the scenes, this method is not too difficult either. So if we look at it, it essentially just wraps the HTTP client transport options for the Model Context Protocol, and then it goes in, makes a client, and say list tools async, and then it just casts them as AI tools. So you don't need to use Agent Framework Toolkit to do this. You can grab the MCP Model Context Protocol client yourself here from the official NuGet package, but I'm just doing it for you, so you don't need to do it yourself. So that is everything for this video. See you in the next one.